The planet is heating up.
The oceans are becoming filled with plastic.
Change starts now.
Change starts now.
We're on a countdown
To zero waste. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Zero Waste Countdown Podcast. Here's your host, Laura Nash.
Hello, my name is Ronan. I'm 9 years old. Last summer, I went to Madawaska Kanu Centre and I learned how to kayak. It was very fun. They serve really good food and I really like their chili. I like kayaking with a group. There's really nice instructors there and really nice people. There's a big rock in the front so all the kids would climb up and eat there and play there. I can't wait to go back next summer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Zero Waste Countdown podcast and radio show. Today, we're speaking with Stefi Van Wijk. She's the director of Madawaska Kanu Centre up in Barry's Bay. It's kind of west of Ottawa. Would you say it's kind of maybe an hour and a half away from Ottawa?
Yeah, 2 hours west of Ottawa. That's what I tell folks. Yep.
Nice. Yeah, because it's straight north of where I live, but I think more people are more familiar with Ottawa, where that is. So it's kind of up, in that region. It's a beautiful, beautiful place and lots of wilderness and some whitewater up there. So welcome to the show, Stefi. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Laura. Yeah, I'm stoked to be on the show.
So I went to Madawaska Kanu Centre last summer, and I brought my son, and he just absolutely loved it and had a wonderful time. The food was amazing. The staff were so friendly. And I noticed when I walked around the back to use the garbage that you guys were almost zero waste. You had recycling set out and you had food waste and all of these sorts of things. So we're going to get to how sustainable you are and how you do it as a resort. But first, let's talk a little bit about what Madawaska Kanu Centre is. So what type of center are you in and what do you do for operations?
Yeah, great question. And it's a hard one for people to wrap their head around because it's such a small sport that we introduce to people. So my grandparents started Madawaska Kanu Centre 50 years ago this year, which is really fun. Lots to celebrate. And the idea behind it was to bring more people into the world of whitewater kayaking and canoeing so that we can travel rivers together all over Canada and kind of give people the skills required to independently paddle. And so 1969, the center was built, and then 1970 and 71 were kind of our first years designing the program. But funnily enough, actually, my grandfather couldn't be a professional paddler until after he went to the Munich Olympics because he was worried he was going to lose his amateur athlete status. Huh. So we technically opened up our doors in 1972.
Your grandfather is an Olympian?
My grandfather is an Olympian.
Wow.
And my grandmother would have been. She was also on the national team. But at the time, whitewater kayaking was only a sport that males could compete in.
Oh, my goodness. Wow, that times changed then because as women that love whitewater, there's a lot of us. That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And it's so cool that you are the director of this place that your grandparents started. And then were your parents involved in the business as well?
For sure. Yeah. So my grandparents ran it for the first 10, 12 years. And then my mom took over when she was about 25. My grandma really valued the food experience and meals, being the German immigrant. She was very tied to her German food heritage. And so our menu is still based around the original meals that she designed 50 years ago.
So that's really cool because the food was just I hate to say it's the best part because I love the river and I loved everything about being there, but the food was just amazing. There are so many different choices, and I think there were like vegan and vegetarian options, right?
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
gluten-free, because we want
Nice.
to make sure that everyone can eat nourishingly for what they need.
Mhm.
Totally. When you're being physically active outdoors, you need to have solid, nourishing food. And so
Mhm.
we take our meal experience really seriously.
Oh yeah, the food was just amazing, and my little boy loved it, which is, it's hard to imagine pleasing all different types of people and adults, and then even the kids love the food too. Like that's pretty good if everybody from a huge age group and everything is loving it. And you're right, it is important. So to paint what MKC looks like, it's kind of on this country road, and then there's kind of a big cliff that goes down to the river across the road. So you're always going up and down. So you're getting lots of exercise. And when I was there, I was walking my boat up and down so that I could kayak the rapids multiple times. So I was getting so much of a workout, and I'm getting older. I don't paddle as much. I'm a mom now, and I was kind of worried that I might get sore. And actually, I didn't at all from all of that output of energy that I was doing. And it now that I think about it, I bet you it was the food because I was just filling up with nutrients and good calories and everything after being in those high energy outputs. So yeah, awesome.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome to hear. I always say that if you hydrate, sleep well, and eat well, then, I mean, not that it's going to heal everything, but like pretty dang close.
Well, speaking of hydrating, so the first thing I noticed when I arrived at MKC was that you guys gave me some water bottles. And I was like, yes, this is my kind of place because I am kind of anti single use water bottle. I
Oh,
know
for
they
sure.
have a place in, an emergency situation or humanitarian situation for sure. But I was so stoked that we were going to be using reusable bottles, and we took those home with us. So we will have them. We love that you could just go to the taps and fill up anywhere because your
Yeah, our
water.
water's so delicious. So it's from a really deep well, and then it goes through a UV filter.
Yeah, so the water was super good tasting and doesn't take a whole lot of energy or like chemicals or anything, right, to make it good. It's just the UV. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's nothing added into it for sure.
Yeah, so that was really great. So I love the water part. And then what I was saying before, that I walked back to throw something in the garbage and I saw that everything was separated. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how I would say you operate very close to zero waste. So could you talk a little bit about that? And I think you even have some chickens. I don't know if those were for eggs or something.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about this as a process because I think it's really easy to kind of, when someone's doing something well, to be like, yep, we've always done this well. But really, it was a process. And over time, and especially because we've been around for 50 years, we've created our systems to work really well for what we do. And so I think it was the early 80s when the local dump decreased their hours to just 1 day a week instead of open every single day. And the system previously would be that every day at the end of the day, we would drive all the garbage, including all of the food waste and everything that would smell really bad, away to the dump. So moving from that to once a week, my mom was stuck with this problem of storing smelly and like it would attract rodents and it would attract bears because we're in the forest. So it's kind of this three-way problem of like it's smelling, it's gross, and it's attracting and messing up with the local fauna and their eating habits. And so through that, we started composting. And so originally we started composting everything that we thought would compost. So that would include like meat and bread and pasta and like leftover chili, as well as like raw fruits and vegetables. And similarly, what was happening, this is over years, right? Like years of each change are happening. And so we
Mhm.
were starting to compost and kind of had this like caged in composting system. And then the only thing that was going into the garbage once a week was like any single-use plastic that came on the food that we had bought, and then recycling, and maybe some construction garbage because, old buildings were always in construction. And then the food waste and the compost was still not solving the problem because we were composting on site, but it was still attracting animals because it was smelling, and it had this odor that just changed the experience of being in a really nice resort. So then the further process was realizing that we could further separate our compost into kind of raw fruits and vegetables and our paper towels and our napkins and tea bags and like coffee filters and stuff. And then that kind of, what would you call that? Kind of cleaner compost would not smell at all, really, because it would be fruit rinds, like corn cobs, like anything from the kitchen when they're prepping. So like tops of carrots and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we had all of our food waste that we sent to a local pig. And we live in the country, so there's always pigs around that people are really stoked to receive. And we give a barrel of food a week to local pigs. Wow. And they're excited. So we usually get some meat in return. And so that's like, plate scrapings, someone not finishing their crust on their bread, and like leftover spaghetti slops. And then also like any leftovers, right? So like a big amount of, let's say, the chili, we forgot, and it was like, now it's a week old and we can't serve that anymore. So that would go to the pigs, as opposed to in the compost that would be quite a mess. So the pigs are stoked about old chili, no matter how old it is. So that was really fun. And then the chickens are kind of another whole thing. So we just love having chickens because so we have hens actually. So they lay eggs, and we serve them and eat them, and they're delicious. And so much, like, yes, we also buy eggs, and then the quality difference is astounding. Like just like the depth of yellow that's in the yolk. I don't know why it's not quite as dark with mass produced eggs. It's a whole different story, but yeah, we love having our own eggs. And then they don't really help us with our waste management per se, but we do have an additional bucket where we add, so that's where we put like hen snacks. So hens really like watermelon rinds and corn cobs that haven't been eaten fully, and kind of other things that are like juicy like that.
So this is a cool point, because I have chickens and I have dogs, and so a lot of our stuff doesn't even get to the compost pile at home because it's like filters. It goes through the chicken filter first. So the chickens want it, like you're saying, melons. They love tomatoes, anything seedy. And then my dog will eat any meat leftovers. And if you're vegan and you're vegetarian, like, then you're well ahead of the game. And that's really awesome. There's also a place for animals in like a sustainable process if you're into that kind of thing, right?
They're crucial. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and then they're providing fertilizer, right? So the chickens poop, and we lost a horse last year, so we're going to be down on horse manure for our garden. But I have 12 chickens now, so we can kind of start to replace that lost horse with. He was really old; he was 32. He had a really wonderful life.
Good.
Yeah, he was so nice and happy and stuff. Of course, easier to take care of chickens, and then they give you wonderful, nutritious eggs, which is super, super amazing.
And easy. They're so easy and like cute, friendly, and the visitors here just love watching our hens, and the kids especially. Like, and they go into their house at the end of the day, and all you do is just close the door behind them. In the morning, we open the door and they go free, and then as soon as the sun goes down, they go back into their home, and then we close the door behind them. It's kind of nuts.
So it was kind of a process. So I love how you mentioned that the dump wasn't taking things every day anymore, and that little change kind of propelled people to start thinking about their garbage. I lived in Whistler for a bit, and they were doing the same thing where they don't have garbage pickup because of the bears. Like, there's so many bears in Whistler. If you put a bag of garbage out, a bear is going to come and tear it apart and make a big mess for you to clean up. So you
Yeah.
have to drive your garbage away, and then it makes you think, well, this is annoying. So how can we reduce it, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's sad to think that necessity creates all change, but definitely necessity creates the most efficient change.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you guys kind of have it figured out. And then I guess you have, do you have to drive your recycling as well?
Yeah, yeah, but it's just right down the road. So
Oh, good.
yeah, so the dump's just down the road, and they take they're a transfer station actually. They're not a dump. So they take our recycling and whatever garbage we have that's left over from all the separating. And the cool thing that I like about our garbage system is that it's also a great educational experience for our guests. We're a school and a resort, right? So yes, it's a relaxing, nourishing luxury getaway. Well, it's not even luxury. We're in the woods. It's not anywhere near as luxury, but it's comfortable. And then so we're educational in the way of like, yeah, you're paddling, you're learning a new sport, or you're diving deeper into the sport that you know and love already. And it's also, as you were saying before, Laura, like our sport brings us to connect with nature and to value anything that you're connected to. Of course, you're going to value and want to take care of it. And so then they can also have this educational experience of, okay, how does this company manage their waste? And it's a, you learn how to get in and out of your boat. Well, at MKC, you also learn how to, at the end of your meal, stop and take a second and, okay, napkins go there. My bones go here. My salad goes here, but then my sauce goes here, right? Like it's such a system.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that that's a really beautiful thing to watch people be like, wow, that this is a lot of work, and we obviously feel that it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was so happy to see, like, I eat this wonderful meal and then I walk in and I'm like, where do I put my plate? And then there's like 3 or 4 different places to put all my different things. And I just think, wow, so many places could do this and figure
Mm-hmm.
it out. But maybe there just hasn't been that push of, oh, hey, we got to keep our garbage for a week, you know?
And where I
Or,
was really shocked, like I worked in a couple of restaurants, and even restaurants in cities that have composting facilities, right? Like cities that do citywide compost, that they
Mhm.
weren't in the restaurant um, composting their food scraps. It was just like, this would be so easy because
Yeah.
a restaurant doesn't have that much garbage other than food waste. Like in my experience in the restaurant, it was like we can all pretty much, like there's no separating required. Like you're chopping and you're like all this just it should go into the compost. It's an interesting thing that requires a little bit of inertia.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Ottawa has the citywide pickup and Belleville has the citywide pickup, and it's so much easier than doing it yourself because you're right, everything goes in the same bin. Like you can put dairy bones, you can put, your carrot tops, your napkins, you can put your pizza boxes if you get greasy pizza
Yeah,
boxes.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super amazing. But yeah, when you're out in the woods like you are, like I am where I live, you kind of have to do those things on your own, right? And compost and or send it or drive it or whatever. So it's really cool to see that you guys have it figured out that way. And what we were saying about the whitewater, so it's one thing to just like go walk around in nature. It's awesome. It's amazing. When you're on the river, you really have to learn about it and like understand it and respect the power, I think, or else you could
Hmm.
get pushed into something you don't want to be pushed into. So you kind of learn an aspect of nature, which is the flow of the river and where it's going to put you and how you can work with nature. Like if you have kayaked before or rafted or boated, there's ferrying techniques where you point your boat a certain way and use the rapids to kind of propel you where you want to go. So you really get to learn how to work with the environment as opposed to
Hmm.
just kind of walking through and enjoying it by looking at it. You're like in it, you're part of it. And I think that part is so cool for environmental awareness.
Oh my God, for sure. And I was talking about this morning with my roommate about how, I don't know if on this show you ever speak about leave no trace in the wilderness. But I love how there's 7 principles of leave no trace, and they're guidelines, and they're not technically hard, fast rules because they really depend on what environment you're in. And so really understanding, like, doing one thing to help reduce your impact in one ecosystem would not actually reduce the impact in another ecosystem entirely, depending on the soil and the amount of rain, etc. But yeah, I like what you've said. Is any sort of deeper connection with nature is going to help you understand that your impact isn't necessarily like you against it. It's very much that you are a part of it. And there is definitely this notion in our culture right now about that there's such thing as nature. Well, in reality, like, nature is everything. And that we have this separation from nature is the actual created conception.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like we
Mhm.
can be part of it, right? When I was in the Amazon jungle, my guide and she was an elderly farmer. She was 69 years old and I couldn't keep up to her. She was so fast walking through the jungle heat and I was like dying, running out of water, trying to keep up. And they had lunch of fruit. So they brought some fruit and they were walking around eating them. And then they were peeling off all the seeds and spreading them around on
Oh,
their,
beautiful. Right. Like if
yeah.
I'm doing that with orange peels here, or if I'm doing that with apple cores on the side of the highway, I'm like bringing animals towards the road, right, to like come and eat those apples, and then they're going to get hit by a car. Whereas there, they have such a connection with the wilderness that they can understand that, okay, like if I were to be disposing of like a toilet paper, that would be so different than disposing of a seed that's a native plant. And I'm actually, yeah, because humans have such a power to, obviously what we've seen is create destruction in nature, but we have such a power to, like, to blossom nature, to support nature, and our role can be positive if it's well studied. Like if you have the ability to learn about how our actions affect the environment around us.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that we can be a good part of it, right? And
Mhm.
that's why I like to focus on the positive messages on the show because I don't, humans, there are some bad things that we're doing to the environment, but it doesn't have to be that way. And there are some amazing people that are doing amazing things. And just you guys separating all your garbage and operating. I know you say you don't operate zero waste, but what I saw was the most zero waste out of any hotel or resort or anywhere I've ever been pretty much other than my own house. You guys were you guys were
Wow.
really on the zero waste stuff and I just loved to see it and I love that you are showing people that it's possible, right? Maybe people go home and think, "Oh, well, I could separate my food scraps." Just
Mhm.
simple little sparks like that could really spread. Um so the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is the relationship with the dam because there is a dam just upstream from the resort and
Mhm.
you work with them to control the flows and stuff and sometimes there are good things about dams that they can be a renewable power source but then I find that they can block nutrient flow and they can cause problems that way. So tell us about your relationship with the dam.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. Paddlers as a whole tend to be against dams because, as for a number of reasons, but as they're created, they tend to ruin sections of rapids, right? Because they use the vertical height loss or the altitude loss to create power. If the dam wasn't there, what would be there are rapids and beautiful waterfalls, etc. And also, they tend to, well, they not tend to, they always flood to create a reservoir above the dam, and so that's a huge environmental impact as well. So in the 50s and early 60s, a whole bunch of small dams in Ontario were built all across Ontario and all sorts of little rivers. And I don't know what went wrong, but they all created these huge lakes, and then now it's being decided by I don't know who, but they're just not worth creating power anymore. Like, they've made them, so they're going to keep them there, but they're not worth having all the machinery in them to create power. And so what they're doing is regulating flow for the singular dam that they want to invest, putting all the machinery and like electronics into to actually create the power and to attach to the grid. So when my grandparents started or were looking to start a whitewater canoeing and kayaking school, they had a bunch of rivers in mind, but they wanted to have the longest season possible. And because of water flow, so in the spring we have, as we all know, we have the snow melt, and so rivers rise in the spring, and then over the course of the summer, let's say August and July tend to be a lot drier, then we have rivers that kind of slow right down to a trickle. And so depending on the river, it's either perfect for learning and teaching and playing, canoeing and kayaking and fishing and everything for in one of those seasons, but usually not all of them. And so my grandparents were kind of humming and hawing of like, okay, well, which season do we want to kind of chance it to like have the most long season that we could, spend the whole winter making bookings and then promise that, someone wants to take a course on this date and that we can guarantee that we will have a great section of whitewater for them. And it was really hard. So as they were paddlers, so they were paddling all across Ontario and in Quebec as well on all these wonderful sections of whitewater. And this section, we call it the Middle Madawaska, which is right below the Bark Lake Dam on Bark Lake. And at the time, so this is like early 60s, mid 60s, at the time there was a dam master, which is kind of an awesome title for someone who lives at the dam or near the dam, and their full-time job is to go to the dam every day and run the dam.
That is an awesome name.
Similar to like a lighthouse master. Like I can kind of imagine that that's kind of a similar job. And so because they were paddling there all the time, they developed a friendly relationship with him. And at the time it was just a man. And they kind of said, hey, like, how much water do you require to run through the dam over the period of 7 days? And he knew exactly how many cubic meters per second he needed to pass through the dam in a 7-day period during a drought. So like, what is the absolute minimum amount of water that he could pass through the dam? Because it wasn't a problem on this section of river to have too much water. It was just once the season carried on, there was not enough water to be fun to play in anymore. The rapids were too rocky, too shallow, and too mellow and like hard to pass boats through. And so they said, okay, well, is there a way for you to concentrate that minimum flow, so that certain amount of flow that is required to pass through during a 7-day period is actually for the downstream town's sewage system? So no matter what kind of drought we're in, the downstream town relies on the river to use as its sewage processing system. I don't really know the whole details, but anyways, there's a required amount. So even when we're at our most drought, the dam will always pass through this amount of water, and it's quite a small amount of water. And so my grandparents and this man came up with some math about, okay, if we turn the water super low, not low enough to affect the fishery and the ecosystem of the river, like we're not drying out the rivers and the lakes, but low at night and on the weekends when the man didn't come to the dam on the weekends. And then how much water for how long of time do we have to concentrate during the day? And it turns out that they were able to have 26 cubic meters per second pass through for 6 hours for 4 days of a week. And 26 cubic meters per second happened to be like kind of the calculated ideal water, but on the lower end of the ideal flows to teach, paddle, learn, and play in whitewater. And so then we had 6 hours every day for 4 days. And so that's why my grandparents created the 5-day course that we have water from 9 to 4 or 10 to 4-ish, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then on Friday of the 5-day course, we go on a river trip, because by then everyone's paddled on the river for 4 days. They've developed their skill. And then on the Friday, the water's off and we head to another river that's a little bit more challenging and more of a kind of an adventurous day trip, so that guests can put their acquired skills to the test, still with the supervision and leadership of their instructor. And hence still the most popular program that we offer was born. The 5-day whitewater kayaking and canoe course. This is 50 years later.
That's awesome. That's really cool that you could work with the dam. Like I like that you guys have kind of sat down, had a relationship, worked it out, and everything is good now. It's great.
Yeah, and so it's been very scary, because since obviously it's no longer a single man that can make huge decisions like this independently. And so as the years go by, and so now it's Ontario Power Generation who runs the dam, and my mom got the Ministry of Natural Resources involved to make sure that that low water that we were bringing the river to, that like kind of overnight on the weekends level when we're in a drought, that we like, okay, M&R, hey, you guys are the smart folks on this. How are we affecting the ecosystem, and can we bring the river to this level, and what is that minimum flow? So the minimum flow was 5 CMS, so 5 cubic meters per second. So we were rocking from 5 cubic meters per second to 26 cubic meters per second on a daily basis during not drought season. Yeah, the kind of like regular summer season.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom is an incredible human. So OPG and M&R, for some reason, was never in communication. And the M&R actually run a series of dams. They run dams that don't create power, like all the kind of rural weirs and like small old dams that you kind of come across on wilderness rivers. Like they're in charge of those. And then the OPG obviously manages these huge concrete, gigantic, dangerous systems. And so my mom brought together to create a Madawaska River Management Plan with the OPG, the M&R, and stakeholders, so landowners, recreational users, the public generally. And they created the Madawaska River Management Plan together that creates an outline of like, hey, when we're in extreme droughts, this is what we will do. When we're in extreme floods, this is what we're going to do. And yeah, all the while guaranteeing us water for the ability for us to maintain our programs, and for the ability for the recreational river users of this area to have like a section of whitewater that we can play in and connect to the river on. And then another little blip in the history of our dam relationship was about, I want to say 7 years ago now, the creation of dam valves. So instead of having water run over the top of the dam, and they were regulated by like big logs that were dropped, kind of creating like a stacked wall to hold back the lake.
Yeah.
So instead of that, they started to have valves that they could open up from afar, like press a button, and then these valves would open, so they wouldn't have to drive all the way into the middle of nowhere to open up the dam. But the trouble was that these valves were at the bottom of the dam. And what is the temperature at the bottom of a lake? If it's deep enough, it's always 4 degrees.
Freezing.
So cold. And so then
Oh
again,
yeah.
like that really affects the ability to have the river be recreationally usable. It
Yeah.
also really affects the fish hatchery and like
Oh.
all of the ecosystems. Like it just freezes them, right? Like they're used to 26-30 degree water in mid-August, and here's
Ooh.
4 degree water, and then it just kills everything.
Yikes.
And so there you go, Claudia Van Wijk. She comes in, she brings the M&R. She's like, y'all, the fish are getting affected, the turtles are getting affected, the frogs are getting affected, and then the paddlers and the community is getting affected. And OPG is just kind of looking to get the easy way out, right? They don't want to staff. Like anytime someone's at the dam, they have to send 2 people, and with COVID, they have to send 2 people in 2 different cars, and it's like a huge amount of expense for them to send people up to manage the dam. So they were really stoked about these valves, these bottom release valve systems. And there's a bunch of rivers that still, they don't have people fighting for the temperature of the water. And so you'll go somewhere in mid-August in Ontario and it feels like a glacial fed river, but it's clearly not. We don't have any glaciers in Ontario.
Well, the Grand Canyon's like that. So if you've ever,
Exactly.
man, I got hypothermia on the Grand Canyon and it was really scary and people were really worried about me and I had to be wrapped up in a taco of sleeping bags and tarps and all sorts of things. It
Yeah.
was so ridiculous. Like my mind started shutting down. I couldn't even form a sentence. And you think of the desert, but there was snow on the rim and then I guess it's the Glen Canyon Dam. So it's a huge dam, not as big as the big
Huge dam. Yeah.
Hoover, but yeah, it's all coming from the bottom. And I never thought that would be affecting the local fish populations. That just never crossed my mind, but that's
Oh
so
my
true,
God.
right?
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
a whole other story. So the Grand Canyon, the river that runs through the Grand Canyon is called the Colorado, as you probably know. And in Spanish, it means colored. And so historically, that river was bright orange and bright red, just like the rocks around it, and because it was full of sand and sediment. And then the dam creates this reservoir which settles all the sand before it goes down the river. And so all the sandbars and beaches have no way on the Colorado and in the Grand Canyon of rebuilding. And so slowly, if you go down the Grand Canyon with kind of that lens on, you can notice that all these beaches are eroding away and they don't have the sediment in the river anymore to rebuild them. And then all that sediment is actually piling up in the lake above the dams, making the dams quite a lot less effective. So the dam is both creating a huge amount of temperature difference because they're releasing from the bottom, which is always 4 degrees, and they're not letting, like as you said, the nutrients and the sediment down the river as well. And here we're still top release because we fought for that, but yeah, we don't have that sediment problem.
Oh yeah, I never thought about that either. Yeah, dams are a weird thing because, there are good things and there are bad things about it. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear that you guys have worked had a good relationship, right? So I guess that's why when we look at pictures, so it used to be from the top and then they tried to go to the bottom and now they do like almost like a spillway. It looks like it's kind of is it from the surface water, but it's not, it comes out a chute. Is that what works now?
Yeah, so it comes off the surface of the lake, and so
Mhm.
it's still held back by this wall of logs. And so if they want to let more water out, they lift a log out to shorten the wall. And then so
Mhm.
what's happening through that spillway off the top is that the top sheet of water is kind of falling down a big waterfall and then falling back into the river.
I have a good picture of the dam, so I'll post that on Instagram so you can
Oh,
see it
cool.
if you're listening. It's my son is kayaking there, and you can see how it's just and I love the picture because you can see the dam in the back and little rapids, and the rapids are so good for learning on too. Like there's
Totally.
some tougher ones in the middle, so you can really up your skills and the children. So my son was 8 when he took the course and or oh no he was 9 but he could walk around the bigger ones, he could go in the little ones, sometimes like one of the rapids he flipped over and pulled his skirt and swam out and swam through the rapid and had a big smile on his face swimming
Yeah.
through the rapid. It
Oh,
was nice.
good. Yeah, Ronan's a
Yeah.
champ. It's
Oh
really,
yeah.
really fun to have him.
he just loves it so much. And it's so funny. I'm going to tell him about the pigs eating the leftover food because we all had to wear our masks last summer, and you guys were very, very nice, but like a little militant about making sure that everybody was distanced and wearing masks all the time and safe, right? Like it was very safe, safely operated. And so sometimes I find when I'm wearing a mask and I look down, I can't see my feet. so,
Yeah.
so Ronan was walking across the deck, and then he tripped because he had his mask on and fell and dropped all his food. And then I think he felt like kind of sad, and we're all like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. But now that he's going to the pigs, I'll have to let him know that.
Oh yeah,
That
he
it
just
went
fed the pigs. Yeah, they would have been so excited. They got a full meal that time instead of just the
Yeah,
scraps.
they got all the good parts that the
Yeah,
humans usually take.
exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, you guys did a great job with COVID. And so I don't know if COVID will be around this summer, but if it is, I'm sure MKC will be a very safe place to go. It's super sustainable. So if you're looking for a sustainable place, and you have some other courses as well, I saw. So I actually took a sourdough course there in the fall with Heather, and she is planning to come on the show as well. So we'll hear
Oh,
all about
good.
the history and how to make sourdough and that sort of thing. So I make sourdough every week now. She did a great job of teaching me, I think. So are there other events that you have if people are not so keen to get into the whitewater?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely focus primarily on whitewater, and I would always argue that whitewater is for everyone. I kind of compare it to biking. Like, it's such a small sport that whitewater gets a reputation of being really extreme because the only people who we see doing it are kind of, the folks that are pursuing more extreme sports. And I compare it to biking, right? So biking, we have the extreme downhill mountain bikers that send big cliffs. And then we also have grandma going to the grocery store. And so no matter where you fall on, right? So
Yeah.
no matter where you fall on like the adrenaline, exciting spectrum, whitewater is for everyone. Like, I tend to fall somewhere near the more like what do I like about being on whitewater is the connecting to the river. I find that, yeah, there's a really beautiful community around it. And yeah, being with my friends and being outside and being active and moving in a way that is like self-fueled. Or what's that word when you're like,
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, so oh my gosh, this is like the best thing that I love about kayaking. I don't really like boating too much because I just feel like it smells like gas. You're using the motors. You can see like little trails of oil and stuff going out the back. No offense to people who boat, like it's super fun, right? But I just love getting exercise and like developing muscle. And so kayaking is like the greatest thing to get out on the water and to get some muscle and get in good shape and propel yourself, right? So instead of using fossil fuels.
because you're so much more connected with the surroundings when it's not being drowned out by the sound of a loud
Oh,
motor. So I really
totally.
find that like paddling can be so quiet. A canoe, kayak, it can be so quiet.
Well, also the whitewater is used like that's almost like a white noise that's healthy for people, I think, too.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh
The
yeah.
the sound of the rushing water. It's nice even just to go down there and just sit by a rapid. I was down there quite a bit just to sit there
Mm-hmm. Totally.
instead of kayaking, or I'd walk my boat up and get tired and then sit there for a minute on a rock and look at the water and go back up. And the staff were so friendly too because I ended up meeting one of the staff members, and then he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go kayaking too." And so we just kayaked together, and you guys were going out after work and all kayaking together in a group, like such a positive, friendly, happy atmosphere. It was really nice.
Yeah, it was so nice to have you there. So good.
Yeah.
Our programs, to answer your question, we our main 5-day course, but then we've kind of themed them. So you were there for a family week because Ronan is quite young, and then we also we have 3 of those per season, and then we have seniors week, which is also super exciting, and then we have a women's week, and we have a slalom week, which is more geared to folks who have experience paddling and want to kind of up the ante and go through gates and maybe do a race. And then, so outside of paddling, you were wondering, so yes, in the off season, we do non-paddling programs. And so we're doing a yoga retreat for the third season in a row. And there's a cycling weekend, the sourdough baking. And Heather was going to be planning in February here. She was going to do, oh my God, it was such a great combination. It was snowshoeing and making sourdough cinnamon buns and yoga. I was like, okay, yes, please. Awesome. But with the Ontario lockdown, we had to cancel that. And then the newest program we had someone move in locally, like just down the road here, who was a writer, and she came to MKC to drop off her kids, and she was like, wow, like I want to host writing, like she's hosts writing workshops before, and so we're launching our first writing workshop weekend. I think it's September 17th and 18th, 2021. So fall 2021. 2-day writing workshop. Yeah.
And a shout out to a local here in the Bay of Quinte area. I don't know their names. Creekside Yoga?
Oh yeah. So Creekside comes up and does, so that's so we did our second annual yoga retreat this fall. And then after that one, we were like, let's do 2 next summer, because we've kind of had 2 different folks want to come. So one kind of folk wants to kind of merge paddling and yoga together, and then the other group of folks doesn't want paddling at all. So we have one midsummer that's going to be paddling and yoga, and then we have one in the fall that's just going to be yoga with I think one afternoon optional paddle.
That's a good idea, yeah, because yoga goes pretty well with kayaking, so that you can kind of stretch out after working hard, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like the theme of balance runs through all of it. The theme of breath being like a calming force when you're a little bit nervous, and body awareness generally. Yeah, there's so many themes that harmonize through that weekend.
Awesome. And there's a little bullfrog pool.
Oh yeah.
How did that happen? Are they there? Like, that's not a natural pool, is it?
It's not a natural pool. So that is funny. So the sauna is right there, and with COVID, we couldn't open up our sauna this year, and it's a beautiful log building, and the sauna gets turned on every afternoon for people to, well, enjoy a sauna after their paddling day. And that is usually like a cold dipping pond when we take good care of it. But this season, we weren't taking care of it at all. We weren't like scooping things. No, I love it though, because that's exactly what it is. It turned into kind of this like ecosystem. It was still gorgeous, and so we had like tons of frogs that moved in, and yeah, we're kind of thinking that we'll just leave it that way and then have it just that people will just shower instead of dip into a pond, because we're definitely supporting the ecosystem in that way. Frogs are really cool.
They're a good indicator species, right? Because frogs, they breathe through their skin, and so if there's a lot of pollution, they can't really live, right? But these frogs were like the biggest frogs I've ever seen. Like, they're from, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of like a kid in overalls or something from like 100 years ago holding up this massive frog that's like half the size of the kid.
Yep. Yeah, that's totally
that's
it.
what these frogs are. And the kids love them. Like, Ronan would be running around, and then he'd be like, I'm going to see the frogs, Mom. Or like, I was just checking out the frogs. Like, every day, just go and check out the frogs, see what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many of them, and they're really good at camouflaging too. And so you'd see one.
Yeah,
like,
you gotta look
cool.
around.
Yeah, exactly. And then you kind of like put your finger in the water, and then a bunch move, and yeah, they're super neat. So clearly we've figured out an environment where frogs thrive. So I wouldn't want to take that away.
You're doing a good job, because the frogs are there. You can tell, right?
Yeah. And, maybe they'll eat some of our bugs.
Oh, and the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes weren't bad there.
Good.
I don't know. Yeah, because they're worse at my house, because I live near Lake Ontario. It's a bit of a swampier area than up where you guys are, where it's more like Shield, right? You're on the Shield, I think, right?
Yep. Yeah, we're on the Shield. Yeah.
Yeah, I think found them.
June can be not awesome for bugs. Yeah, we have because black flies, yeah, they breed in moving water. So they come up from the river, black flies. But as soon
Hmm.
as it gets too dry for black flies in like late June, early July, they head out.
Yeah, the black flies are vicious and horrible, but they're very short-lived. So if you can just get through the few weeks that they're there in Ontario, then you're fine. Then the
Yeah.
mosquitoes come.
Yeah, exactly. But you're right, the mosquitoes here aren't bad.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was the partnerships with all the local businesses, right? Are you
Okay.
so there's a coffee shop, I think, or a
Yeah.
grinder? What? Yeah, so you use like local coffee. I think there's some local kind of aromatherapy stuff you use.
Yeah, so I mean around here it's a cornucopia of like small businesses and startups and cool people doing cool things. And so the coffee shop, the coffee roastery and coffee shop called Madawaska Coffee, they live right across the river from MKC. And they actually met through working at MKC. And so they started a roastery in town. Well, they started in their house, but then now they've built a bigger roastery. And so we serve Madawaska coffee in our cafe, in our espresso machine, and also like all of the coffee that we serve at MKC, and it's freshly roasted every morning, or freshly roasted probably every week, but then what's it called? Freshly ground every morning. And
It's really good. It's
yeah,
good.
it's so
They're
good.
like,
Okay, good. I'm glad you think
yeah,
so.
it's awesome. It's so nice to wake up and then there's coffee ready for you. Like it's just the nicest, you wake up, nature, and then the staff was they had to make the coffee because of COVID. We couldn't like touch any of the stuff, right? So they would just be like, "Coffee?" Somebody would be standing there. It was great.
Oh, good. Yeah, that was kind of fun. We could kind of meet everyone in the morning. And then who else do we work with? There's a lady who lives down the road who has started making CBD infused muscle creams, and so we sell that, and that's really nice too. To be like, oh, you have some sore muscles, like try this. Like there's testers in the office.
Nice.
We work with a number of local farmers. There's a bunch of great farms nearby. Our maple syrup comes from a farm probably about 15 minutes away. We work with a company called Go Greens, which also is about 20 minutes away, and they have a mix of like greenhouses and gardens, and they only have greens, I'm pretty sure. And so they actually sell to a number of restaurants and cafes in Ottawa, like bigger companies. And then also we were getting a box per week just to have nice fresh varieties of leafy greens for the mornings. That was fun. Yeah.
The maple syrup is awesome because I'm always blown away when I go to restaurants in Ontario that don't have real maple syrup because so many restaurants just give you like the corn syrup or whatever. And maple syrup is so abundant here. Like we even make it ourselves, not just a tiny, tiny bit, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's just everywhere and it's so good and it makes such a difference. So thank you for serving real maple syrup. It's amazing.
Yeah, and so that was another thing. I think we changed that like mid 90s or maybe even late 90s, but it was a big cost barrier, right? Like for some reason, I don't know why sugar is so much like sugar to syrup is so much cheaper. Like, I guess it's just
Yeah.
like it's from so far away, and I can't imagine that it's that much less work. But I mean, maple syrup is a huge amount of work to make, but it's
Yeah,
literally
it
the
is.
blood of
Yeah.
trees.
You're right. It's got like antioxidants in it, I think,
It's so
as
good.
opposed to.
Ugh, I think
Yeah.
I mean, maybe chocolate would be my favorite thing in the world, but maple syrup's really close.
It's delicious, yeah, and a little bit healthier than regular sugar, I think. I think there's antioxidants.
And then a
Um,
really good friend of mine who lives just on the other side of the park, of Algonquin Park, from us, she distills her own essential oils, and so her company is called North Shore Apothecary, named after the North Shore
mhm.
of Georgian Bay. And she made us our hand sanitizers for this season. So we had like really nice smelling hand sanitizers. We had a cedar sage one, and then we had a lavender one. I think lots of us smelled pretty good.
That's awesome. Yeah, she would be a good one to bring on the show too. I've talked to her before on Instagram because her stuff's amazing. I have some of the it's like a lip balm or something, and it's in a sliding tin container.
Yeah. Yeah, what is
Yeah.
it? It's like mint and cocoa, I think.
Yeah, some sort of chocolate. Yeah, it's pretty good, and I like the container, like the sliding metal container, because it's recyclable and
Hmm.
it's not the
Not plastic.
plastic tube, right? The plastic
Yeah, she
chapstick
works really
tube.
hard to make sure that she doesn't have her stuff in plastic. We had to work with a plastic bottle for the hand sanitizer because we wanted people to be able to put it in their life jacket pocket for the river and not worry about
Yeah.
smashing. But other than that one product, she works with all glass and metal, which is super cool. And it's so beautiful. So she's done a couple workshops with us. Sometimes for our evening programs, we've brought her in a couple times to just talk us through, how and we harvest. So we kind of decided as a group, like, okay, what are we wanting to make? Like, are we going to make a perfume? And then we went around, and she does like a smelling tour. And so we'd go around and like smell the cedar and smell the, like, oh, there's a peony that my mom planted, and it's like all these, like, it's like a smelling tour of the area. And so we ended up, I think it was fir. So I think we harvested a bunch of fir and wintergreen, which ended up being a really cool combination of smells. And then we made our own like Madawaska Riverside perfume. Yeah,
Oh wow,
it's
that's
cool.
awesome. Yeah, I remember you having like lots of good gardens and there are little signs showing like what different things were, which is cool for kids as
Yeah,
well. So
that's all my mom. Yeah, I can't take any
nice.
credit for that.
Yeah, she
She's
did
an
a great
amazing
job.
gardener. Hmm.
And so if people are listening and they don't want to commit to the paddling school, they can go for a day trip rafting, is that right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. You know our programs well. So our rafting trips, we pride ourselves that it's the most accessible rafting in the world. So we take 2-year olds, and it's quite a lovely tour of this beautiful river. It's very mellow, but like engaging at the same time. So it's a 2-hour trip, and you get to see the Madawaska River.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a nice float. The rapids are good, so it's fun for the kids to sit in the front and get really splashed. And there's a cool little history, I think, because isn't it a park or something? So there's some houses built on the river, but no more can be built because those old ones have been grandfathered in. And is that what happened?
Yeah, yeah. Another interesting thing that was actually my grandparents too. So when they decided that Madawaska was going to be their destination for MKC, they 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 could have built on the side of the river, and I think retrospectively I probably would have, because as you said at the beginning of this show, you walked up and down this hill, right? And so why do we walk up and down the hill? Well, they knew that if we were allowed to build on right next to the river, then everyone would want to build right next to the river. And so it was all crown land at the time. And so they, with their, I don't know how you end up buying crown land in the 60s, but that's what they did. And then they rallied to get the rest of the crown land a conservation preserve. So
Mm-hmm.
not any, you're not allowed to build any additional buildings on, or have, like, none of that is allowed to be private land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is kind of neat. But there are still some houses that were already there, so you can kind of see those as you
Mm-hmm.
float by, and yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, it's a wonderful place if you have the time and you're in the area. If you want to take a day and go for a raft tour, or if you are interested in learning paddling and connecting to nature on that level, but also being taken care of at the resort. It's a really nice place to be. I think things book up really fast too, because I remember looking at one last summer and it was all booked. So I think you're a pretty busy resort, and but not it's not like crowded or anything or busy. I don't mean it that way,
I
right?
think it's,
Um,
yeah, it's busy to book because we limit it to make sure that
yeah.
we have quaint numbers. Hmm.
Yeah, so it's manageable and not harming the environment if you have like thousands of people, there. I mean, how many guests do you usually get in a whole summer?
We limit it to 30 students per week. At least this season with COVID, we did.
Hmm.
Sometimes, so before COVID, we were at about 50 limit to 50 students per week. 30 was so
Hmm.
nice.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place. Ronan and I are booked in for one of the family weeks this summer, and we're both really excited to go back. And Ronan's going to improve on some of his skills, and he's excited to do the bridge jump again.
Yes, wonderful. Yeah, we're so excited to have you guys back. Right on.
Yeah, we can't wait to go. Well, this has been great. So thank you. This has just been wonderful. I look forward to seeing you next summer. And thanks for telling us all about the dam and how you've become so sustainable. It's great.
Thanks so much for asking such interesting and important questions and welcoming me onto your show. Thank you so much.
It's been really great. That was Stefi Van Wijk. She's the director of Madawaska Kanu Centre in Barry's Bay, Ontario.
Change starts now.
This is the Zero Waste Countdown Podcast.